Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Salem. And tonight I thought I would tackle a question that I'm often asked, but have not been asked by any particular individual at this moment, and that is, what is the Correllian lustration? And of course, my reason for picking this question is that tonight on Pagans Tonight Radio I will be discussing lustration, and this upcoming weekend is the weekend of the lustration of the ancestors. So, the lustration is a ceremony of blessing and protection for the entire tradition. It invokes the Correllian ancestors and asks for their blessing to be channeled through the oracle of the tradition. A message is given, and the blessing is channeled into lustral water, which is then used to symbolically bless not only everyone present, but the entire tradition. The term lustration means blessing by light, and the term lustral water refers to water which has been blessed by light or energy. There are two different ways to do this. You can bless lustral water with moonlight or sunlight by placing it in the moonlight or sunlight to be charged, along with affirmations or incantations. Or you can do what we do in the Correllian lustration, which is where you channel energy into the water to bless it in that way. The lustrations have grown out of traditional ancestral ceremonies that we do to honor the ancestors. And we still do the more traditional sort as well. But several years ago, quite a few years ago actually now, it was decided that we should make this a central act for the tradition, and that what had been private ceremonies of the Mother Temple should become public ceremonies that everyone could take part in. It's often remarked that it confuses people who are more accustomed to modern Wiccan sensibilities that the lustration of the ancestors is in the spring. And this is partly because the Correllian tradition has developed through several generations and a number of different influences. Not necessarily the same influences as the rest of the Wiccan community. We have considered ourselves to be Wiccan since 1979, but we've been influenced by many things over the course of our history. The lustration of the ancestors is placed in the spring, partly because that's when they placed it. Partly because in former generations it was timed to coincide with Memorial Day celebrations, and also because there was a belief that just as the earth was greening, so too the influence of the ancestors would wax throughout the warm months and throughout the year. And so that's kind of why the lustration of the ancestors is in the spring, to the best of my knowledge, and as I was taught. It is traditional to offer flowers, and the particular flower associated with the Correllian ancestors is the peony, whose name, by the way, means prayer, peon. So it has a very long association with spirituality. And I'm sometimes asked why it's particularly sacred to the Correllian ancestors, and my real answer is that my mother said so. It was the flower she normally used for ancestral celebrations. She grew them herself and took great pride in them, and she would offer them to the ancestors, particularly her own parents, but the ancestors in general. Of course, any offering is acceptable to the ancestors as long as it's made with love. Now, we formerly celebrated tradition-wide the lustration of the living in the fall of the Northern Hemisphere, but this will now be celebrated at the temple level, and can be celebrated at any temple that has an oracle associated with it. It is placed in the fall. And one of the reasons it's placed in the fall is it honors the new members of the tradition, as well as all living members of the tradition, but particularly the new ones. And so it's thought of as being connected to the idea of harvest or the maturity of the fields. So I think that's enough to say about lustration for tonight. And I hope you have a lovely evening. And until next time, may you blessed be.